Good morning, everyone. My name is Nora, and today I will be presenting my findings on supporting the creation of walkable complete communities, understanding walkability through a holistic lens by Jorge Andrés Delgado-Ron. As the title suggests, this reading talks about the considerations and what it takes to make a city walkable. The city mentioned in the reading is Vancouver in British Columbia, but I think the concept behind it goes along with a city like Toronto or any other urban places. So let's get on with it. So first things first, we must figure out what does it mean for a city to have walkability. Well, the article mentioned that for an area to be walkable, the walker must cooperate with the walkable space. But what does that even mean? What makes a walkable space? Well, we can classify a walkable space by these 4 questions. 1. Can we walk there? Which talks about the terrain needed to make walking and moving around easier. 2. Should we walk there? Which regards to physical and psychological safety of the walker. 3. Will we walk there? Which discusses on the rival modes of transportation and transportation preferences of walkers. And finally, 4. Who is we? Which is recognizing individuality of the walker. So now, let's go to the first question. Can we walk there? Well, when we think of walking somewhere, I'm sure everyone will think of these 3 things: the terrain of the walk, the distance of the walk, and of course the safety of the walk. The idea also goes when measuring the walkability of the city. First, transversability is considered, which means analyzing the terrain of our walk. Flat terrains are preferable. Then we consider compactness, which is the distance between point A to B. More shortcuts from A to B would also heighten the walkability factor. And lastly, we need to consider the safety, which asks, will the walker be able to survive the walk uninjured? All 3 of these considerations are important for a city to be walkable. These considerations can be analyzed using the walkability scales. The walkability scales comes in 2 forms: macro scales and micro scales. Macro scales analyze walkability from satellite viewpoints. It would measure out, for example, compactness. Like walk score counts the closeness of destination and accessibility in larger scale. Microscales measure the features and obstacles of an urban area in a closer scale, such as with a microscale audit of pedestrian streetscapes or maps. When analyzing in microscale, we can also simply just use our eyes near ground level. Another thing that comes to mind with the walkability scale are personal factors of the walker. For example, every walker's budget and daily need access would make differences in the walkability scale. Moving into the second question, should we walk there, talks about the safety and threats the walker will need to overcome. We need to ask the questions such as, how do we minimize physical and psychological danger amongst walkers? And how do the environment of the walking space affect diverse population? Safety is far more difficult to evaluate because it is a very personalized issue. Each person would have a different understanding of what safety is, but typically it would relate to the environment and the people living in the area. The reading mentions some ways to measure safety, such as Holly Crambeck's The Global Walkability Index, the MAPS tool, which I mentioned before, and also human presence. Our third question is, will we walk there? This question talks about the rivalry of walking versus other modes of transportation. We must ask, what makes a walker prefer to take other means of transportation rather than walking? I think question number 3 and 4 correlates to each other more because it talks about the individual transportation preferences and walking behaviors of the walker. With this topic, the unique individuality of the walker might play a role with their preferences. Now, the final question to walkability is 4. Who is we? The article states that a walker is someone who navigates the city without using motorized vehicles such as cars. In the walker, we must recognize 5 things. Number 1, diversity, unique to everyone's anatomy, preferences, abilities, and etc. Number 2, age, which plays a crucial role in walkability. For example, children and adults are very different in walkability because of differing priorities, responsibilities, and abilities. Number 3, disability. Mobility device users are more likely to be sensitive to inaccessible environments. Number 4, lifestyle. For example, how the LGBTQ2S communities are more likely to experience microaggression during walks, which impacts their safety. And the second example is how societal gender roles affect walkability, like a mom who has to push her baby in a stroller. And finally, number 5, wealth. Neighborhoods of wealthier income are typically deemed as safer than lower income neighborhoods. Now, I just wanted to share my walkability rating for Toronto. As you can see with the pictures on the left, these are the pictures that was taken from different walking trips that I had in Toronto. Personally, Toronto is the best in terms of walkability. As a walker that uses a wheelchair to roam around, I found that the city is great to explore than any other cities around the world. Originally, I'm from Jakarta, Indonesia, and Jakarta is far worse in terms of walkability because it lacks the accessibility for me, and I don't feel safe at all when walking, since the city doesn't have proper sidewalks. In Jakarta, the sidewalks are filled with motorcycles, so I'd say it's amazing how I can travel around Toronto independently with my wheelchair. Even with my friends, who you can see on the bottom picture also uses mobility devices. Thank you for listening to my presentation. I hope that my insights from Delgado-Ron's booklet have taught you a few things about walkability.